Today we're diving into a dramatic development that could reshape the dynamics of the conflict. Baltic Sea shock. Denmark just crippled Putin's supply line. This is a high-stakes event, bringing maritime, strategic, and geopolitical elements into sharp focus. In this video, we'll unpack exactly what happened, how Denmark executed such a move, what it means for Putin's war machine, and how this could ripple across Europe and beyond. The Baltic Sea has long been a theater of strategic importance. While much attention is paid to land battles, disrupting supply lines at sea can deliver crippling blows. If Denmark has indeed managed to severely hamper Russian logistics, the consequences could cascade through Russia's ability to sustain operations, particularly in regions where overland routes are stretched or contested. Denmark's position is geographically pivotal. It anchors access to the Baltic Sea for NATO members and controls key choke points. For decades, Copenhagen has invested in maritime surveillance, naval capabilities, and intelligence cooperation with its allies. But doing something that inflicts tangible damage on Russia's supply chains, especially in wartime, requires precision, intelligence, risk appetite, and coordination. So, what exactly did Denmark do? Available reports indicate that Denmark, working alongside Allied intelligence, executed operations targeting Russian maritime supply routes, including monitoring, intercepting, and potentially disabling certain logistical vessels, the goal to choke off the flow of material, fuel, ammunition, spare parts that Russia needs to maintain its offensive capacity in Ukraine and elsewhere. Let's step through the mechanics. First, intelligence holes had to be filled. Denmark and its allies presumably tracked shipping manifests, EYE's automatic identification system, data, satellite imagery, and signals intelligence to identify Russian supply ships and their routes. Once identified, specific vessels became targets for interdiction, surveillance, or disabling actions. Second, the naval and maritime enforcement capability had to be ready. Denmark's navy, coastal patrol units, underwater drones, and maritime special forces likely formed the toolkit. Mines, electronic warfare, interceptors, and perhaps sabotage missions could all play roles. These are dangerous actions, but the strategic upside is immense. Delay or deny Russian resupply. Third, coordination with other nations and maritime agencies would be essential. In a sea as crowded and politically sensitive as the Baltic, Danish operations would need deconfliction with NATO allies, air and naval reconnaissance support, and legal cover to avoid escalation beyond control. Fourth, follow-up actions, tracking, assessment, and reinforcement are crucial. Once a supply ship is damaged or intercepted, intelligence must verify the impact, cargo lost, whether the vessel is out of action, delays incurred. They must also anticipate Russian countermeasures, rerouting through safer but longer corridors, increasing escort or security, or even retaliatory action. The effect on Russian supply lines can be profound. Russia's ability to sustain long-range operations, especially in contested or peripheral regions, depends heavily on maritime logistics. If the usual Baltic routes face disruption, supply must be rerouted through longer, riskier paths, maybe north via the Arctic or south through the Black Sea. But both carry new dangers and delays. One immediate consequence is increased operational friction for Russian forces. Delays in ammunition, fuel, and spare parts reduce tempo, force commanders to conserve resources, slow offensives, or even withdraw from unstable fronts. Morale can suffer when front-line units experience shortages or inconsistent supply. Another is strategic signaling. Denmark's move sends a message that even nations not directly on the front line can strike meaningful blows to Russia's war effort. It raises the cost for Moscow to operate in maritime domains, underscores NATO readiness, and demonstrates the reach of collective defense. Yet Denmark had to navigate legal and diplomatic peril. Intervening in Russian supply lines risks escalation. Copenhagen would need legal justification, perhaps under Allied defense agreements, self-defense doctrine, or treaty obligations. They'd have to avoid actions that provoke broader conflict or give Moscow pretext to retaliate against Danish or NATO assets. It's possible that some operations were designed to stay just under absolute overt conflict threshold, covert sabotage, cyber interventions, or electronic interference that disable systems rather than provoke full naval battles. Russia won't sit idle. One typical response is to shift supply routes or methods. They might increase reliance on overland corridors, especially through friendly territories, or develop new sea routes in safer waters. They may also beef up escort fleets, ship defenses, or deploy anti-interdiction measures like mines, defensive weapons, or jamming. Russia might retaliate in Baltic waters, targeting Danish maritime assets or installations, or engage in intensified submarine activity, harassment of commercial shipping, or cyber attacks. They could also seek diplomatic retaliation, sanctions, or information warfare to delegitimize Denmark's actions. From NATO's vantage point, this opens both opportunities and challenges. A bold move like Denmark's can galvanize allies to act more aggressively in maritime interdiction, strengthen joint naval operations, and coordinate better intelligence and assets. But it also raises the stakes. Russia may escalate, test NATO's thresholds, or flirt with broader conflict. On the other hand, such actions must be calibrated carefully. Escalation risks maritime accidents or unintended confrontations. Ensuring proportional responses, deconfliction mechanisms, and transparent chains of command is essential. The balance between strategic effect and avoiding miscalculation is delicate. In Europe, the political fallout matters. Denmark may receive praise and support from nations wishing to assist Ukraine indirectly but substantially. Some countries might follow suit or seek to bolster maritime interdiction capabilities. It can shift the war narrative to include sea domains more prominently. Conversely, Russia and its allies may decry Denmark's actions as aggressive or unlawful, seeking to rally diplomatic or media condemnation. Some non-aligned states may view Denmark's move as destabilizing. Copenhagen must handle the narrative, framing such actions as defensive, collaborative with allies, and necessary to stop aggression. Longer term, this could influence how wars are waged in 21st century Europe. Control of maritime supply routes may become more contested battlegrounds. States with strong navies, intelligence, and readiness may carry outsized influence, even if they do not deploy troops on front lines. Denmark's role, as a relatively small country wielding strategic geography, could grow in prominence. It also challenges Russia's assumptions. Moscow may have counted on certain sea lanes being relatively secure. Now they'll have to reassess vulnerability. Russian naval and maritime logistics doctrine might shift, investing more in protection, redundancy, and strategic concealment. They may stage more defensive postures at naval choke points, or increase surveillance around supply routes. For Ukraine, the impact is potentially significant. If Russian resupply gets choked, their ability to sustain pressure on multiple fronts, Donbas, Kherson, or southern coastal regions, can weaken. That gives defenders breathing space, ability to launch counteroffensives, reorganize reserves, and exploit Russian logistical stress points. But there's a cautionary side. Russia may retaliate elsewhere, targeting NATO supply lines, striking civilian maritime infrastructure, or escalating in other theaters to divert attention. Europe and NATO must be vigilant, prepared diplomatically and militarily to contain wider spillover. In assessing Denmark's success, it's crucial to watch real metrics. How many supply ships delayed or disabled, how much cargo lost, how long rerouted delays are, and whether Russian forces cited as constraining. Also watching Russian counters new routes, defensive bill, doubts, or even direct reprisals. Furthermore, media and intelligence claims must be verified independently. In wartime, narratives often exaggerate successes. Verification through satellite imagery, shipping data, open-source intelligence, and third-party observers will reveal the true scale of damage. Another dimension, economic and energy logistics. Some supplies might be dual-use or civilian in appearance. Disrupting maritime logistics can affect commercial shipping, insurance rates, rerouting costs, and coastal economies. Denmark and allies must manage collateral impact ensuring civilian shipping isn't unduly harmed, that neutrality laws are respected, and that regional trade doesn't suffer catastrophe. Also, Denmark's political domestic calculus matters. Bold military interventions carry risk. The Danish government must balance public support, coalition stability, and the risk of escalation. They must be confident in legal cover, international backing, and stop defenses in case of Russian reprisals. International law is a dense field here. Maritime interdiction, blockade, seizure, or sabotage must navigate UNCLOS, the law of the sea, and wartime conventions. Denmark must avoid actions classed as piracy or aggression. Most likely, they are framing operations as supporting collective defense or responding to an ongoing illegal war by Russia, justifying proxy intervention under Allied frameworks. Public messaging also matters. Denmark and NATO will want to shape the narrative. This is not a gratuitous attack, but a measured attempt to interdict supplies used to sustain aggression. Transparency, selective disclosure, and strategic leaks can help shape international opinion favorably. Allied cooperation is critical. Denmark likely did not act entirely alone. Information sharing, intelligence pipelines, naval coordination, and contingency support from NATO or EU partners are probably in play behind the scenes. Such joint effort reduces individual risk and amplifies the operational footprint. On the flip side, Russia may seek to exploit divisions among NATO members, point to escalation risks, or pressure countries reluctant to engage in maritime interdiction. Copenhagen must manage alliances, reassure hesitant states, and stay unified to avoid fracturing support. We should also consider the symbolic power. A relatively small country stepping boldly into strategic interdiction can shake narratives of who can fight effectively in modern conflict. It may inspire other mid-sized states to invest more in specialized maritime or asymmetric warfare capabilities. Looking ahead, tension will concentrate in Baltic Sea areas, sea lanes, choke points, straits, naval zones, even undersea infrastructure like cables or pipelines. Denmark and allies may intensify patrols, intelligence gathering, and rapid reaction capacity to exploit further opportunities or counter Russian moves. Russia may respond with more aggressive naval posturing, submarine harassment, mine-laying, coastal missile deployment, harassment of civilian shipping, or increased intelligence operations near Danish waters that raises the risk of direct confrontations or incidents. NATO must be ready for escalation control, maritime rules of engagement, and crisis management. It's possible we'll see Russia accelerating investment in stealth, unmanned underwater drones, protected convoys, decoy ships, or electronic jamming to shield supply lines. They might also try to sacrifice less critical supply ships or route less vital material through risky paths to conserve main lines. Another scenario, Russia might try to retaliate beyond the Baltic, targeting Danish or Allied shipping in other seas, using asymmetric strikes like cyber attacks, missile strikes on ports, or Disruption of maritime infrastructure. The broader NATO alliance must be ready to absorb or deter blowback. Public and media perception will be contested. Russian state media will likely denounce Denmark's action, accuse it of aggression, and attempt to rally international condemnation. Denmark/NATO must counter with clear evidence, legal rationale, and moral framing. In summary, Denmark's alleged crippling of Russia's Baltic supply line is a bold, high-stakes move. If executed well, it can place serious pressure on Russia's logistics, slow its operations, and shift maritime domains into sharper focus. But it carries risks of retaliation, escalation, legal blowback, and miscalculation. Close monitoring of metrics, verification, allied coordination, and escalation management will determine whether this becomes a turning moment or a provocative gambit. So stay tuned. Watch for shipping logs, satellite imagery, Russian countermeasures, and signals from NATO and Russia over coming days. If Denmark has indeed pulled off a successful maritime interdiction, this could mark a strategic pivot in how wars are fought in Europe's seas. Let me know your thoughts. Do you think Russia can rebound, or will this knock a hole in its supply lifeline?